Welcome back. Now for the news in detail. Unknown gunmen have killed 8 civilians in an attack at a hospital in Afghanistan's capital, Kabul. The Interior Ministry says several others have been wounded and security forces are trying to clear the facility. The ministry said security forces have evacuated over 80 people, including women and children, from the hospital and killed 1 assailant. Meanwhile, officials say several people have been killed in a suicide attack at a funeral in Nangarhar province. The Taliban have denied responsibility for both attacks. The death toll from COVID-19 in the U.S. has crossed 80,000 after 830 people died in the last 24 hours. The global death count has exceeded 286,000, with nearly 4.2 million people infected. More in this report.
In many countries, the number of deaths and new cases have started to fall. However, concerns persist over a second spike in the absence of a cure. The death toll in the U.S. has overtaken any fatalities from the seasonal flu going back to 1967 and during the first 11 years of the AIDS epidemic. But new cases are now declining in New Jersey and New York, the epicenter of the COVID-19 in the country. President Donald Trump insists his administration's response to the virus has been the best in the world.
In the span of just a few short months, we've developed a testing capacity unmatched and unrivaled anywhere in the world, and it's not even close. This is a core element of our plan to safely and gradually reopen America, and we're opening and we're starting, and there's enthusiasm like I haven't seen in a long time.
France has begun to lift its lockdowns with millions back to work after 8 weeks of restrictions. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson says the country will need to think about how its economy can adapt if a vaccine for COVID-19 does not emerge quickly. Johnson also laid out a cautious plan to get Britain back to work.
People should stay alert by working from home if you can, limiting contact with other people, keeping distance if you go out, 2 meters apart where possible, washing your hands regularly, wearing a face covering when you're in enclosed spaces and where it's difficult to be socially distant.
Meanwhile, in South Korea, 101 people have now tested positive for the coronavirus after a cluster outbreak at clubs in Seoul.
Pakistan has recorded 39 more deaths from coronavirus in the last day, with the tally now at 706. The Health Ministry says there are 32,081 confirmed cases now, after 1,140 were reported in the last 24 hours. Officials say 8,555 patients of coronavirus have recovered so far. The ministry said there are 11,869 cases in Punjab, 12,017 in Sindh, 4,875 in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, 2,061 in Balochistan, and 716 in the capital, Islamabad. Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi has said Pakistan is ahead of other South Asian countries in terms of virus testing. He said the government has made 70 labs fully functional in a bid to further enhance testing capacities. Well, Pakistan and Iran have agreed to enhance security measures on either side of their border. Army Chief General Qamar Javed Bajwa spoke to his Iranian counterpart, Major General Bagheri, in a phone call. In a statement, the Pakistani military's media wing said Bajwa told Bagheri that Pakistan has started fencing the border. He said Islamabad will require bilateral cooperation with Tehran to ensure security. They also discussed the martyrdom of 6 Pakistani soldiers in a recent terror attack near the joint border. Bajwa called for an end to smuggling activity used by terrorists and narco-traffickers to conceal their movement. The media wing said both discussed COVID-19 and the need to improve border terminals to address related issues. In occupied Kashmir, students and politicians have condemned the Indian Supreme Court's refusal to lift the internet ban from the valley. Earlier, rejecting those petitions, the Indian top court asked New Delhi to constitute a special committee over the issue. Speaking to media, several students said the absence of the internet has devastated their online education. They said high-speed internet is the need of the hour to help the beleaguered education sector in the valley. Local politicians said the world is heavily reliant on the internet amid the COVID-19 pandemic, but Kashmiris are being denied access to it. They said the internet ban is impeding work-from-home regimen of professionals, including doctors. The valley has been under a communication blackout for the past 282 days. Continuing its communal policies, India's ruling party lawmaker has said members of the Tablighi Jamaat should be treated as terrorists. Since the outbreak of COVID-19, the government and media have been accusing Muslims of spreading the virus in the country. Bharatiya Janata Party leader Ajay Nishad said in madrasas, children are taught only about fundamentalism. Nishad alleged his constituency had no coronavirus case before members of the Muslim organization reached there. He said minorities, especially Muslims, have made the situation critical in the country owing to their lack of education. The Health Ministry has reported over 2,294 deaths and more than 70,000 coronavirus cases in the country. Bipartisan legislation tabled in the U.S. House of Representatives has called for sanctions on the Russian government over alleged human rights abuses. House Foreign Affairs Committee Chairperson Eliot Engel introduced the bill, calling on Moscow to immediately release political prisoners. Engel labeled President Vladimir Putin a cruel authoritarian and accused him of silencing civil liberties and suppressing political opposition. The proposed bill's co-sponsor, Michael McCall, said Putin has been busy hiding his many failures. U.S. President Donald Trump has ruled out renegotiating the trade deal with China. At a White House press briefing, Trump said Beijing will only want changes for its own benefit. The Phase 1 trade deal reached in January ended a standoff between Washington and Beijing. The agreement ended potential tariffs on around $155 billion worth of Chinese imports. In exchange, China pledged to spend at least $200 billion more on American goods and services than it did in 2017 over a 2-year period. Trump said it was up to Beijing to fulfill their end of the bargain.
China has been taking advantage of the United States for many, many years, for decades, because we had people at this position right here where I'm standing, sitting right in that office, the Oval Office, that allowed that to happen. No, I'm not interested in that. Let's see if they live up to the deal that they signed.
Well, Trump has threatened to withdraw from the agreement if China fails to live up to its commitments. Iran's Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif says an Iranian scientist detained in the U.S. on groundless charges has been freed. Zarif said Sirus Asghari will return to the country if he tests negative for coronavirus. In a statement, Zarif said the Iranian Foreign Ministry has been working hard to pave the way for the scientist's return. Asghari, a professor of material sciences at Sharif University of Technology, was arrested in the United States in mid-2017. He was charged with withholding information in the process of his visa application, circumventing sanctions, and transferring technology to Iran. Meanwhile, the U.S. has asked Tehran to send a charter plane to take home 11 Iranian nationals being deported by Washington. In a Twitter post, Homeland Security Department official has accused Iran of stalling the repatriation process. Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has said the kingdom will continue its efforts to remove Sudan from the U.S.'s list of state sponsors of terrorism. In a phone call with the head of Sudan's Sovereign Council, Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, Salman stressed Riyadh's keenness on security and stability in Khartoum. In January, the kingdom asked the United States to remove Sudan from its list of state sponsors of terrorism. The designation prevents Khartoum from receiving debt relief and financing from the International Monetary Fund and World Bank. Heavy fighting has broken out between government troops and separatists in southern Yemen. This is the first major clash since separatists declared self-rule over the region. Southern Transition Council official Nabil al-Hanashi said the two sides fought over control of Zinjibar, the capital of Abyan province. Al-Hanashi said STC forces killed several government troops while thwarting an attack. STC President Eidarus Qasem Zubaydi accused the government of not following the peace agreement and attacking the council's forces. Meanwhile, the government said its troops will do everything necessary to preserve the state and safety of its citizens. It said the Southern Council must follow the Riyadh Agreement and refrain from self-rule or bear the consequences. The Libyan National Army says it did not attack the Turkish embassy in Tripoli, but the Government of National Accord did. This comes after Turkey warned it will consider Khalifa Haftar's forces a legitimate target if it continues to attack its interests. LNA spokesperson Ahmed al-Mismari admitted targeting Libya's Matiga airport. He said the airport has a military operations room which is used to target LNA forces and civilians. But al-Mismari rejected a report on the airport attack by the UN mission in Libya. He said the mission speaks on behalf of terrorist groups. I'll be back after this break with plenty more news. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Turkey says it has killed 3 militants of the Kurdistan Workers' Party in northern Syria. The Defense Ministry said the fighters were killed during Operation Peace Spring. The ministry said it would not stop the operations against militants in the region. The ministry has also said Turkish and Russian forces have conducted their 10th joint patrol on a key highway in Syria's northwestern border. It said troops from the two countries carried out land and aerial inspections in Idlib. The patrols are part of an agreement brokered between Turkey and Russia on March the 5th in Moscow. The UN Agency for Children has called on Israel to release imprisoned Palestinian children. In a statement, UNICEF warned that children in detention face a heightened risk of contracting COVID-19. The statement added that at the end of March, Israeli authorities had 194 Palestinian minors in prisons. It said the rights of children to protection, safety, and well-being must be upheld at all times. The UN agency's officials said the children are denied in-person access to their families and lawyers. Germany says it will spend 750 million euros on a program to develop and distribute coronavirus vaccines. Last month, Berlin authorized the first clinical trial of a coronavirus vaccine developed by BioNTech. At a briefing, Research Minister Anja Karliczek said about €500 million are to be spent on expanding trial capacity in Germany, while 250 million is earmarked for developing production capacity. Karliczek said as soon as the vaccine is found, production must start quickly and on a large scale. Meanwhile, a New York research says the anti-malarial drug hydroxychloroquine has shown mixed results against coronavirus in early studies. However, combining that drug with the dietary supplement zinc sulfate can create a more effective treatment. Oxfam International has said world efforts towards a global ceasefire to contain COVID-19 have been a catastrophic failure. In a report, the NGO said fighting continues in many conflict-torn countries despite a UN appeal in March. The report said the problem was compounded by a diplomatic failure at the UN Security Council and years of weak investment in peace-building efforts. It said many countries remain active participants of the war machinery, conducting operations, selling arms, and supporting third parties. On May 8th, the U.S. refused to vote on a UN resolution for a global ceasefire, which Oxfam said was the latest failure of the Council. The report said that only a halt in violence will allow an effective response to the new coronavirus. Russia's President Vladimir Putin has eased the nationwide coronavirus lockdown, sending people back to work after 6 weeks. Now, this has happened despite Russia's number of COVID-19 infections rising to the third highest in the world. In a televised address, Putin said some regions may keep tighter controls if necessary. He said it is in everyone's interest for the economy to return to normal quickly.
всей стране пока исключаются.
Throughout the whole country, any mass events should not take place, and of course, everyone needs to strictly comply with sanitary rules. This applies to the work of organizations, enterprises, shops, the service and transport sector. The increased safety regime should be maintained for people over 65, as well as for those who suffer from chronic diseases.
The World Health Organization says extreme vigilance is needed as countries begin to exit from lockdowns. In a news briefing, Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus said the slow, steady lifting of lockdowns is key. The WHO welcomed the slowing down of COVID-19, but urged vigilance to keep the gains that have come at a severe socio-economic cost. The warning comes at a time when Germany has reported a rise in virus transmission rate since easing its restrictions. Ghebreyesus said many countries used their lockdown time to ramp up their testing abilities, which is the best way to track the virus. The Venezuelan opposition leader Juan Guaido has accepted the resignation of his Miami-based advisor, Juan Rendon. Rendon acknowledged discussions with a U.S. security firm to topple President Nicolas Maduro. Guaido, though, has denied any involvement in the bungled invasion. In a statement, Guaido thanked Rendon and another exiled lawmaker, Sergio Vergara, who also resigned from the opposition's Crisis Strategy Commission. He appreciated their dedication and commitment to Venezuela. Rendon has said he cut ties with the firm's chief executive, Jordan Goudreau, in November, while Vergara said he had not been aware of the so-called Operation Gideon. Meanwhile, Venezuela's military says it has arrested 8 more people in connection with that failed invasion. China has successfully launched 2 satellites into orbit for its space-based Internet of Things project. State media reported the satellites were sent on a Kuaizhou 1A rocket from a launch center in Jiuquan. These 2 are the first of 80 low-orbit communication satellites that are part of the Xingyun engineering project. The satellites will be used to test applications in the fields of environmental monitoring, meteorological forecasting, and marine transport communication. European stock markets are trading mixed in a volatile session. Investors have become increasingly concerned about a potential second wave of coronavirus cases. London's FTSE 100 is trading 0.5% higher as the UK plans to ease lockdown restrictions. The gains of Frankfurt's DAX were dampened due to a 12% dip in multinational ThyssenKrupp. CAC 40 in Paris is trading marginally lower. In Asia, Hong Kong's Hang Seng led the losses, closing nearly 1.5% lower. Seoul's Kospi lost over 0.5% as well, while the Shanghai Composite lost ground after Chinese inflation data for April missed expectations. International benchmark Brent crude oil price has gained over 2%. The International Monetary Fund has approved over $2.7 billion in emergency aid for Egypt. In a statement, the IMF said the emergency financing will help the country deal with the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. It also said under a fund-supported reform program, the country saw a remarkable turnaround prior to the pandemic shock. The monetary body said the progress of the country is not threatened and that the IMF is ready to provide further support. Egypt's foreign reserves have fallen to $37 billion from more than $45.5 billion at the end of February. The country has reported over 9,700 infection cases and 533 deaths. Time now to find out what the weather is like around the world. For the latest updates on these and other stories, you can always follow us on our social media at Indus.news. Thanks for watching.